And it will start recording.
And well, before I do the "and we're back" thing,
Yes.
how are we going to the video thing for the sound bites, like the spots,
The
like
spots. What spots?
like for
We're seeing spots.
the
Dalmatian
Pwnecast stuff.
for Pwnecast. Oh, I
Like,
figured. I just like I don't know if we have anything, any kind of like animation. But for right now, I was just gonna cut our videos, and then just plop them in. Like maybe fade them out or something like that, and then have the ad spot, and then fade them back in when the ad spot's over, something like that.
yeah, but like what, like, are you just gonna like a placeholder graphic or something with like their,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
like, just like maybe just their podcast artwork or whatever, and just
Yeah.
use that as a
Boom.
sort of, yeah.
There you go. I like it.
Yeah. Okay.
Or get a picture of the oh, what do you call it? The storefront of the gaming emporium.
Oh,
Phil's Gaming Emporium.
Phil's, you get some beautiful AI art of Phil's Gaming Emporium.
That's a great idea. Oh man. So
Um,
people can experience it. No. Anyways.
all right.
Yeah.
All right. And we're back. All
Hello
right,
again.
folks. So tonight, like, listen, this one is probably not going to be super heavy. All we're going to be talking about is really sort of moving forward what 2025 is hopefully going to look like for us as a podcast. And so I don't know that there's going to be really any like deep topical discussion or exploration of themes or anything that you might be accustomed to. And this might not be a 2.5 hour long episode. In fact, I'd almost put money on it that it won't be. I could
How
be
much
wrong
money?
though. Well, $1. I'm not confident in our ability to keep things light and easy and breezy. We are really good at being bad at brevity,
That's
and
true.
it's kind of our
But
shtick.
that actually brings us to the first thing. So this is a New Year's episode. We're talking New Year's resolutions. Not really, but sort of. We are talking about, like you said, what the podcast is going to look like in the new year. And the first one of those things is that we're going to start being good at brevity. And so we're doing that with it. No, that's actually not
This was
your
not in the
face when I
notes.
said that.
No,
You're going off script, man. I don't know.
you're not saying that. I never said that. I did
I
not
did
agree
not
to
agree.
this.
I will never be good at brevity, dang it.
Well, okay, and just and again, this is more for the benefit of people who might be checking us out for the first time. Is we tend to just we like, granted, you're not going to get like 4-5 hour long episodes out of us that often. I'm not saying it will never happen, because we have been fairly beefy. Like, we've got some
Yep.
chonkers out there, but but we do try to, like, we want to give the conversation time to breathe, and we want to actually have a conversation. And Joe Rogan says it only gets good, it starts getting good at the 2 hour mark. I think that's mostly because he's a drug addled. It's, if he weren't so stoned all the time, he might actually be able to have conversations that pick up a little quicker. But I think that's only, like, listen, it's Joe Rogan. He's got like the biggest podcast on the face of the planet. So
Right.
yeah, okay. Like him, hate him, love him, whatever, I don't, but I do think, like, that idea is sound, is that good conversation and the really meaningful stuff happens after a while. That's why we do the banter up front. That's why we sort of have like these like little warm up stuff with our media talk and with the backlog reports and all of that stuff. Like, a lot of that is to sort of like keep priming the pump and like help us to sort of get ready for the main event. So I don't, like, I'll just be honest, that's something that I just don't see us ever And again, it's not, we're not going to be like, it's always, at least an hour and a half. Like, listen, if we don't have much to say, we don't have much to say. And
Sure.
we've got to be honest and kind of move on. But
Hmm.
I do think on the other side of it is like, it's a bit of a hallmark for us that we
Yeah.
take the time that we need to have the conversation that we need.
Hmm. Yeah. Also, in 175 episodes, that has never happened. So, uh, I don't think
No,
we've ever come to an episode and said, I really don't have much to say on this topic. And that's why we've chosen it.
usually, well, and usually, like, I mean, like, sometimes we'll have like, there are the random hour and a half long sort of bits, but they tend to
Hmm.
be the exception, not the rule.
Hmm.
Um, so if you're looking for
Yeah.
something quick and easy and breezy, may I recommend our friend Mark over at Quick Play? Um,
Hmm.
you know, he does short talks about video games that are very, very good. We,
Yes.
however, do long talks about video games that are also hopefully very, very good.
Mm.
At least
So
we
we hope.
endeavor for that. We endeavor to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, because we just yeah, like you said, we want to dig into it. We want to see what there is, and that actually leads us into part of the reason that we want to do this episode. So yes, it is a looking forward at 2025, but it is also kind of a culmination of some things that we've been discussing for the last few months. I'd say 3-4 months at least. Um,
It feels like, and again, it feels like probably in some ways we've probably been talking around this for maybe a year.
mhm. Oh yeah.
Like some of this stuff has sort of like got floated a long, kind of floated out a long time ago, but it's
Mhm.
only within the last like 6 months or so, yeah, that we've really kind of like said, oh no, like, hey, maybe it is time to sort of like strike some of take a swing at some of this stuff. So,
Right. Right. Yeah. And we don't necessarily have to go into all of the reasons for that. I will just throw out there that a big part of that was just how much my life has changed and my family life has changed over the past year and a half, 2 years now. That caused some starts and stops to some ideas that we had that you had as well. Because I think you were starting to look this way, and what could the podcast become, before I kind of jumped on board just because I was focusing on what
well,
life was gonna look like.
you
So there
had
was
a
that.
much more pressing sort of issue to address. You were
Yeah.
looking for another job, and meanwhile,
Right.
I'm over here
Right.
daydreaming, and you're going like, "Well, okay, dude, but
Those
you
are
know."
great ideas. Yeah. And but I just can't dedicate that much. And so now that life has kind of settled down into kind of this new phase, this new season of life, then it has been some more thinking deeply about why we do this podcast. Because so
Mhm,
back from the beginning, we've done it just for the fun of it. We think that we do have some interesting things to say. We think that video
mhm.
games, we can have discussions about video games that go a little bit deeper than kind of the surface level talk. Because I mean, video game, we all know. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably know you've probably listened to other podcasts or followed other YouTube channels that talk about this as well. There's so much content out there. You can get people's opinions all day long, whether that's in written form, audio, video, whatever. But we also recognize that some of the way that the video game journalism industry works is that you have to go at such a rapid pace that you can't go very deep. Now there are other outlets that do go deeper that we personally appreciate a lot. However, when we take a look at what we do as a podcast, there were a few things that we wanted to solidify and make explicit, and as we're moving forward just in our identity as the Backlog Breakdown. And so out of that has come a few different things, one of which is the most obvious probably to you now because we mentioned it a few times. We want to go on YouTube. We recognize there's lots of people who enjoy listening to podcasts and watching podcasts on YouTube. So hey, why not? We have had cameras while we're doing this. for
Mhm.
quite a long time, largely because we want to see each other when we talk, because that
Yeah.
helps the conversation. Um,
Yes.
but so even from the beginning, I mean, I don't remember ever doing just audio. I could
Well,
be wrong there.
it started out, I think they were Skype calls.
Yeah,
Um, they were Skype
yeah.
calls, and then we would record the audio
Yeah,
separately.
we do that separately and we just sync them up in post. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, so there is that video. It's just another level of how we want to do that. We've been talking logistics for a while, but that's the first thing that we wanted to do is commit. And so a few months ago, when we decided that we did want to commit to it, we had kind of tested the waters with a few things, and we said, "Hey, we're going to launch it in 2025." And so here we are, New Year's Day, launching our video version of these podcasts in 2025. Um, let's come back to that in just a moment. I want to go back to where, or pick up from where I left off earlier, is just solidifying what we want this podcast to be and what we believe it is. So for me, and Nate, you can correct me if you'd like, if you have like a different take on this. But for me, as I thought about what we do as a podcast and the conversations that we have, yes, we talk about video games primarily, but we've also been circling around this idea of stewardship, how to work and play well, and how those two interact, and rest in the place of recreation. And obviously, we have always talked about the fact that we are Christians. Like, we have a Christian worldview. So when we evaluate video games, when we evaluate our time with video games, we do so from hopefully a scriptural lens, but with the idea that this is a good gift from God and we want to engage in it wisely. And so we want to engage with the themes in the games that we play wisely. We want to be honest about the time that we spend and use our time wisely, because as it says in Romans, we ought to be a living sacrifice. Our whole life is an offering up to the Lord. That doesn't mean you're always working, though. It does mean there are these rhythms of work and rest, because that's how God has created us and how He created the world. So all these things, these things have always been a part of the podcast.
Mhm.
But early on, in my mind, I thought, well, I don't want to limit us to just talking to other Christians about video games. I want everyone to be able to participate. And while I do think, I understand my thought process, um, as I've come to evaluate the podcast more, and as we've had some discussion, and as I look around, here's what clinched it for me, is that as I look around online, in the online space, even in the church, in the evangelical spaces that I'm a part of, and that sounds so 2025 spaces that I'm in, um, I think there is a huge hole of people that are talking about video games in particular, entertainment in large measure, but video games in particular, because it's such a huge part of the culture. Um, but I don't think that Christians, by and large, are talking about video games and engaging with the medium very deeply. And so we wanted to be more explicit about the fact that, yeah, we are Christians. And so our primary, um, our conversations are going to come from that worldview. And you're always going to get that. And we want the church to be able to, the church is the people of the church, the Big C church, to be able to engage in this medium wisely. And we want to equip people to do so. So that has become our main goal. Now, if you're not Christian, of course you can still listen, but just recognize that has become our goal. And so we've made some small changes over the past few months. You may have noticed, some of the intro that we do, even some of the way that our conversations go. I have tried to be more explicit about some of the scriptural themes in the games that I play, or the way that it relates to the way that faith interacts with the things that we're dealing with in video games. Again, it's always been there, but that's going to be a bigger part of it is the purpose behind the podcast now. So I feel like I've been going for a while. You have something to say,
No,
Nate?
yeah, I think all of that, it was like I would sort of second and amen to all of that. What I would also just sort of stress is that I think, like, again, it's like you said, those things have always sort of been there, but they will be, I think, much more pronounced for both of
Mhm,
us sort of moving forward. I think, like, and you said intentional, sort of just being a lot more intentional about it. I think it just, we're we're basically honing
mhm,
our our scope. I don't know.
mhm,
We're zeroing in, and part of it was just the fact that, um, frankly speaking, that we thought that there was a little bit of a lack in sort of Christian commentary on this, and especially because it is so important. And I think the other sort of side to this is we also recognize that in a way that we kind of want to say, like, hey, we're a bit of a resource. Like, you have two guys
mhm,
who were both churchmen. Like, you're a pastor,
mhm,
I'm a deacon, you're an elder, and I'm a deacon in our respective denominations,
mhm.
and we love the church. We love our brothers and sisters. We also really we love video games. Not the same way, right? But we
Yeah.
think video games are pretty cool. We and not just pretty cool, but like they can be powerful storytelling tools or like
Mhm,
modes, and it's like they are so incredibly, such a, in some ways, it's taken for granted how big a part and like how big a role, like, everybody plays video games now.
mhm.
um and just the fact that there isn't more, it's like when we had Patrick
Right.
Miller from on, and he pointed out the fact that the video game industry is makes more money than music and film. Like, this
Mhm,
is a massive industry with massive cultural impact, and
mhm,
Christians, in a lot of ways, we can't shy away from that stuff. And I don't think the answer, and I don't think that you think that the answer is to just sort of retreat from it. It's rather to learn
mhm.
how to be in the world and not of the world. And so, as
Right.
a part of it, like, what we're saying is, like, we're kind of looking at our brothers and sisters and saying, hey, use us here, like, as a resource in sort of maybe exploring, like, is like, when it comes to the games that we're going to be talking, that we have talked about, that we will be talking about, like, hey, like, listen to that coverage, like, use that to help maybe shape whether or not you should play this, or maybe whether or not you should allow your children to play this. um
Mhm,
Use us, and just sort of like, and maybe thinking about how you relate to this stuff, like, use our passion and our expertise to help you maybe equip yourself and or your brothers and sisters in the church to say, like, hey, like, the way we can think about this in a better way. And we're
mhm.
going to sit here, like, I'm going to sit here and tell you, like, are we probably the best qualified people for this? No, but we're here. Like, we're showing
Mhm.
up. Like, and this is kind
Yeah.
of what we've been doing for years in sort of a much more casual sort of capacity. And I think at this point in time, we're just sort of saying, like, well, we've kind of been doing this. Like, why don't we make it official, so to speak?
Yeah.
And so I really think it's not, it's almost a further evolution, where it's not just like, hey, we've kind of been doing this, so let's actually refine that and sort of zero in on that. It's also saying, like, let's actually, like, put legs on it too, and saying, like, hey, yeah, we've been having these conversations about this for years, and actually looking at the church, and in a way saying, like, here you go, like, here's a tool,
Mhm,
here's a handle, like, here is a place for you, our brothers and sisters who might need help navigating this, at least to like, maybe springboard conversations.
yeah.
So that's kind of, one of the things that, like, in sort of adding, sort of further building out, like, we want to build this thing, like, we want to be a resource, we want to be useful, we
Mhm,
want to be helpful, we want to be a blessing to our brothers and sisters, we want to be a blessing to the church. And we
Mhm.
don't think that the answer is like, oh, video games are bad. They're counterproductive. Because like some of that is true. Some of that criticism is true, right? And we don't shy away from saying that, like, hey, there are problems and pitfalls and things that we need to be concerned about and conversations that need to be had. But
Mhm.
and for some people, hey, maybe video games are not viable. But
Right.
I think like
Yeah.
at the same time, we need to just sort of say, but they're not immoral. They're not
Mhm.
always a waste of time. Can they
Mhm.
be? Yeah, sure. But like I think the best things is it's kind of this, is it hard to sort of navigate these the questions surrounding some of this? Sure. But most good things, most worthwhile things are hard. And I think that sort of cultivating a healthy relationship with not just video games, but media and entertainment in general
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
hard, but good.
Mhm.
Like, and it's like we should be able to engage with good books, good movies, good music, good video games,
Mhm.
you know, using discretion and wisdom.
Right. Right.
But like, and so that's kind of what we're doing. We're saying like, hey, like, and in our conversations, hopefully that will help you, the listener, and help, others to think about these things and to ask these questions and maybe actually do the hard thing, which is a good thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and insofar, like you were saying, insofar we don't think that video games are inherently bad or wrong or anything like that. Insofar as they are a form of entertainment, then we ought to treat and think about entertainment in very similar ways. But insofar as they are a unique form of entertainment. So, for instance, I think video games are acutely more addictive than something like reading books because of the
mhm,
way that it engages you. I also think they can be uniquely impactful because you have player agency in the story that's unfolding. So those are some of the themes, that we want to tackle and that we have, frankly, over the years of doing this podcast. But those are some of the things that we want to deal with seriously and talk about seriously. And yes, we cut up a lot. We have a good time and we joke around. But we
yeah.
want to
Well,
have some
we're
deeper
goofballs.
conversations. Right. Right. So and we're never going to get away from that. That's just
Mm-mm.
that's just part of it. So anyways, that's where we want to take the podcast. And again, these conversations have been occurring for a few months, and so you might have noticed some of these changes. We already have been kind of steering the ship that way. But once that was solidified as who we are as a podcast and kind of a renewed purpose behind it, whereas it didn't start with that purpose. It was to dive deeper into video games to make sure we're enjoying the games that we own over just getting caught up in the hype cycle. That's where our name came from, the Backlog Breakdown. But as we move forward, yeah, we really want to help even give a template, how you engage with stories and storytelling. And again, in this unique medium of video games that you actually interact with, and how that forms the player, because we even something is recent as the Outer Wilds that we played, we both recognized that there was something different about being explained the ending of that game or watching someone else play the ending of that game to actually being in control in the ending of that game.
Yeah.
There's another level there that touches a little deeper, that's hard to describe, to put into words, but I think that's something special about the medium. Now, as Christians, again, we have to be careful, because if what games like that are saying are wrong, they actually lead us away from the truth of God, of the way that He's created the world. We have to be very careful with that, and we have to, keep our heads and not get drunk on the interaction of video games. But again, those are the conversations that we seek to have on this podcast, not just for our own sakes. Yet, yes, there's an element where it is for our own sake. There's an element where we just want to praise the beauty of certain things. We as humans do that all the time, but also as Nate has said, we want to be a resource for anyone else who is looking into the medium, who might not have even thought about these things before, who just, hey, likes playing a game at the end of the day just to unwind. Well, we would encourage you to think a little bit deeper about it. Think about the time that you have and how you're spending your time. Is this the wisest use of time? And when you can wholeheartedly say that, yes, this is a good form of just recreation, and then use it as an offering, and use the stories that are being told to tell us the deeper truths, or to point us towards, excuse me. Maybe that's a better way of putting it,
I
to
think
point us towards the ultimate truth. Yeah.
just something to just sort of as a general observation is like we actually advocate that entertainment is good and in some ways necessary, and I
Hmm.
think that in some ways like we are sort of running counter to a lot of the narrative where so much of and again this is it's pretty anecdotal, like it's pretty like based in my experience, but so much of what I see in online sort of like in Christian, you know, adjacent and evangelical circles is about like it's about maximizing productivity. And
Hmm.
you know, I think part of what we want to do is we actually want to help people reclaim the idea that rest and recreation and play is just as important. Now, granted, there is a you have we should have a different relationship. You know, it's like, you know, and again talking about like 6 days of work, 1 day of rest, kind of thing. But like
Hmm.
that
Yep.
that rest is actually an important part, and play as part of being like play being sort of restorative
Hmm.
is important. You know,
Yeah.
like we kind of want to, in a way, we are pushing back against some of the narrative where it's like you need to be hyper productive, and we're saying like,
Hmm.
well, like let's pump the brakes, and like so in some ways, like we even sort of like push at that. Like part of what we do is we want to help the church in a small way reclaim a healthy love of play, a healthy
Hmm.
love of like and so we're pushing against sort of the some of the more western americanized secular tendencies to sort of think that it's all about like what like production and being
Hmm.
productive, and you know, and because I think yeah, I think there's a lot there, and you know that's sort of been a personal hobby horse of mine for years anyways, so
Hmm.
um
Yeah.
but but yeah, I wanted to sort of like tack that on to what you're saying. Like you're just saying like, hey, we do stress that like often.
Yeah.
Like we kind of hammer on that a lot. It's like no, like it's not just like a play is like, oh, you can do this. In some ways, we're saying like, no, you probably should do this. Like this
Hmm.
might this could be good for you. This could be restorative to you, and not again, not specifically video games, but
Hmm.
just in general, like the general premise of like resting and recreating
Yeah.
and saying like
Yeah.
play is good and play is necessary, and not just for kids, but like, you
Hmm.
know, it's as a vital part of fellowship and
Hmm.
community and
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. And so a lot of these things have just been solidified, I'd say, over the past year or and whatnot. So with all that in mind, that's kind of the bulk of what we wanted to talk about. But kind of the next steps, or the things that we foresee here coming down the pike. Obviously, we already mentioned it. Hey, we're here on YouTube. Hi. Um, because we recognize there are people who want to who enjoy their podcasts on YouTube. It's where people are. I also recognize it's a bit more shareable than podcasts, because if you've never gotten into podcasts, oh, what's a feed? You know, how do you even do this outside of like a
Yeah.
one-off kind of a thing? You know, so there's a number of reasons. And so hey, we're here on YouTube now. We are looking at some other other ways to engage on YouTube. The podcast first and foremost is what we're committing to, having that uploaded on our YouTube channel here every other week, every, you know, main episode, and then bite-sized episodes every other week as well. And then we'd like to, you know, time permitting, but we've been testing the waters with some things of doing different clips and things like that.
Hmm.
Obviously, as time goes on, production quality will probably get better. This is, that we're still learning, and we're going to continue to learn. But this is how we're starting out with YouTube. I would say for just a second, because it is more shareable, because we are just kind of getting started here on YouTube. Nate always mentions, yeah, we have the Patreon if you've done the sharing and the caring. And this is what I wanted to mention real quick, is just that, hey, we'd appreciate it if you tell your friends about us,
Yeah.
because we want to be a resource to the church. When we decided that, I think these things started flowing. Okay, how do we get the word out? Like, how do we even tell people who we are outside of the podcast that we're already doing? And so YouTube is one of those avenues. So we'd encourage you, if you like what we're doing, tell your friends, or share it, on social media or something, like, just recommend. And maybe that'll come easier if we do start doing clips and things like that, as opposed to these full, multi-hour long episodes. Totally understand that. With that, I would also encourage your feedback as well. Obviously, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of negative feedback just because of the nature of the internet, but that said, that can roll off our backs, no big deal. But if there is something that you want to see from us,
Well,
like I said,
I won't let them
clips or
know that
things
I'm
like that.
crying myself to sleep at nights.
Right. Um, no, I think the fact that we know who we are, as a podcast, helps a lot
Mhm.
in that. But if there are things that you would recommend, or other ways that we can engage, other things that you see us doing, that you would have some suggestions, I'd say we're all ears to those things,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
suggestions and things like that. So we've got tons of ways you can reach out. Obviously, our link tree, linktree.com/the backlog breakdown. You can find us on social media there. You can comment on this video as well. So tons of ways you can do that, but we'd love to hear from you, and other people who might have more ideas. So that is the YouTube. That's what we're committing to for this year. We also do have some bigger plans. One that I will just mention, and in generalities, because we're still kind of grappling with the how and the logistics and things like that,
Mhm.
is one of the things that we talked about when we decided who we wanted to be, is what our and our purpose and things like that, and how we want to be able to equip other people. um, One of the ideas that I had come up with was focusing around this top 100 games list that we have. And obviously, what does that mean that you're a top 100? But we've done episodes on a number of the different games that we have there. And so I think it would be beneficial to have some sort of a resource with even write-ups or links to episodes and things like that, so that our top 100 games could be a living document for someone who maybe is new to the medium and wants to hear about these games. Or maybe, Nate, like you mentioned earlier, maybe it's a parent who knows that their kid likes games and they don't understand what the big deal is, and so they can take a look at this list and take a look at these write-ups on these different games and why we enjoy them, or some of the pitfalls of some of them, or things along those lines.
Yeah.
So that said, and again, you may have noticed, but I think there is going to be a little bit more of a focus on these top 100 games that we have. And of course, it is, as much as we joke about it, it is a living document. And so things are going to be moved around, even though it's official for all of 2025. We have our top 100 official best games, or top 100 games, that, things will be moved around and things will be changed eventually over time.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and
so there's going to be a
you
focus on that.
you talked about how we want it to be a living document, and it kind of is, because it's
Hmm.
this thing that we do a mid-year refresh where we kind of
Hmm.
take it out and we look and see if anything that we played needs to make it on there, and then we do the end of the year sort of like big wrap up, and but we are definitely going to emphasize, like, look at that and emphasize that a lot more. And again, like, hopefully what we'd like to do is build out some sort of website or platform or something where, like,
Hmm.
you can, yeah, if there's a game on that list and we have an episode where you can listen to the conversation about that, where there might be a write-up accompanying that. So it's like
Hmm.
that again, that's part of the us wanting to be a resource, just again,
Yeah.
reiterating, restating what you said, but like that is important to us, that um that content be a little bit more readily available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because we recognize at this point we're 175 episodes in, and so there's a lot of things that we've said.
Hmm.
So if we could, yeah, have kind of a more manageable way of looking at that from the standpoint of someone who's new to video games or who hasn't thought about video games in the way that we've been talking about them,
Just
something like that is something we aspire to create as a resource.
I think one of the things is, and just as a general sort of thrust of our content, we are really going to try to be a lot more intentional about, because there are holes. There are games on the top 100 list that neither one of us have, or that one of us might not have played or beaten. There are
Hmm.
like, because like, and this comes back to the original sort of birth of this list. It was actually populated by like, we actually asked friends and family to send us um their top tens, and then we
Hmm.
kind of had a tabulation thing. And over the years, what's happened is Josh and I have sort of like, that was the initial sort of run of things, and then over
Hmm.
the years, Josh and I have like filtered through that, and we've sort of chipped away at some things, and we've just pulled other stuff. And so in a lot of ways, the top 100 list is not really, it's not an objective metric. Rather, it's really subjective. It's like the top 100 list is like the games, the 100 games that Josh and I recommend. We're like, these are must play titles, and some of that
Hmm.
is pretty heavily caveated, some of that isn't. um and yeah, so, but there's a fair bit of stuff where it's not unanimous, like,
Hmm.
and some of that is just like, we both played it and we land in very different spots. Like,
Hmm.
recently we had a little bit of conversation about Death Stranding. I love that game. Josh does not. um but there are other games where, frankly, like, one of us probably hasn't played it or beaten it or played enough of it. And so we're gonna try to basically fill the holes in that. And a lot more of our content
Hmm.
moving forward this year, especially, is we're really going to try to focus on filling out that content. And obviously, we're going to still focus on trying to do more, or focus on keeping up with the patron episodes and the patron requests. Like, we want to make more of
Hmm.
a priority. That's always kind of been a priority, but we want to be a little bit more intentional with that. And there might actually be a bit of a scaling back of some of the topical stuff, um,
Hmm.
just because we do want to be a little more. It's not that we're gonna abandon topical episodes, because
Right.
frankly, like, that sometimes is really the meat and potatoes, and sometimes we'll just dust off like old stuff and sort of explore it, and maybe look at our thoughts and see if maybe these are the ways that I've changed or shifted or growed in this area. And like, I think differently now than I did 2-3 years ago. Because
Hmm.
that's how humanity works. That's how being a person works, is that you grow and you learn and you change. Dare I say it, on a Christian podcast, you evolve, not physically, but
Hmm.
spiritually,
But like a
mentally.
Pokemon.
Like, no,
I'm
no,
kidding.
no. You're the worst, is what you are. Um,
Yeah, that's one of
no,
those like video game Jesus juke things like
it was
that. I
terrible.
feel like a lot of Christian video game content that I see online is something along those lines.
Yeah. Well, and
Evolution. It's sort of
that's
like how we grow in Jesus.
That's yeah. Also, like, some of why we're doing what we're doing is some of what we saw out there was really kind of uh want in it wanted for a lot. And so we
Mhm.
want to offer something maybe a little more substantial and meaty and robust. And
Yeah,
we think that,
that's our aim. That's our goal.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think we accomplish at least a little bit of that,
Yeah,
hopefully. But yeah,
sometimes. I mean,
hmm,
sometimes we just come off sounding like absolute idiots. I'm sure.
yeah,
I'm sure. I mean,
that happens.
I'm on this podcast, so I'm sure that there's, a fair amount of idiocy. And with your love of puns and dad jokes, I'm sure that,
Mm, mhm.
whatever I'm missing just by being an ignoramus, you more than make up for.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you.
Is it?
But
Is it?
that is that is really what we've come to share for this episode. It's New Year, and that is, the goals that we have for the podcast are going to revolve around that. There's some more granular things, that we're looking into in order to accomplish that. But by and large, that is kind of where we're headed as a podcast. Those are the New Year's resolutions for the podcast as we move forward. Um, and I say that to say that we are full steam ahead. We enjoy what we're doing, and we're going to continue it as long as God sees fit to allow us the time to do it. And
Yeah. And just the sort of an additional, like another sort of addendum or caveat here
Mhm,
is that we are trying to roll this out in a way. Both of us work, like I'm a letter carrier in the United
mhm,
States Postal Service. You're a pastor. Um, we have full-time jobs,
mhm,
and we have families, and so we're trying to
mhm.
sort of move forward with this in a way that doesn't take from either one of those primary areas of responsibility. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of we're doing this in our spare time, and so yeah,
Mhm,
it's one of those things, like, it'd be absolutely insane if someday this could be more than just sort of like an amateur thing. It's not
mhm,
outside of it's not outside the realm of possibility, but I think it's more of like we kind of exist as, for lack of a better term, lay people in this space. um,
yeah.
and so we're we're just we're trying to be reasonable and fairly measured in sort of rolling things out. But
Mhm,
and
yeah.
so it's, we've got some stuff, and again, like, we're sort of exploring avenues for a potential web page, sort of
Mhm,
thing. We're not sure exactly how we want to roll that out. But we do know that, like, we have an idea where at this point in time it is like, Josh, I think you use the term, it's sort of more of a logistical thing and trying to figure out how and where, that we're going to really kind of pull the trigger on some of this stuff. So
mhm,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't know that I have much more to add other than just like, yeah, it's the formats. Not there's for longtime listeners, there's not really going to be much of a change in some ways.
Mhm,
Not to the format, not really to and again, there's a little bit of like, we're going to try to be a lot more game oriented in sort of like
mhm,
covering games. But yeah, um, and hopefully, sort of with the added pressure of yeah, and I say this with the added pressure of this being on YouTube, um, instead of just an audio feed, maybe that will sort of light a fire under my butt sometimes, and I'll come in like a little hotter, a little more prepared. Um, I don't know. Um, you know,
Can't make any promises.
I'm not making any promises. I do. Um, I think some of the fun is just like kind of like just having the conversation and see where it goes. And sometimes it gets messy and a little chaotic and silly. But I'm there for that though too. So,
Mhm,
but
yeah.
yeah, I mean, just like I personally, I'm kind of excited to see where this thing goes. And I think at the end of the day, just the the important part is like, we do want this to be useful more than anything else. We want this to, we want this to be helpful and
Mhm,
encouraging, and just we want it to be useful. We want it to bless the church, and
yeah.
so yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, those are our thoughts for the new year and where we're headed, where we're going for this new year. Before we take off, before we end this episode, we do have just a few more forms to hit before we're done. We always like to give a shout out to someone in our community. And I've done this before, so I know this is a little bit of a retread, but I feel like it's just apt with not this format change, but being on YouTube, possibly. Maybe you found this through someone else. Maybe you're newer listener. But I wanted to shout out not someone personally, but in our Discord, we have a channel that we call Onwards and Upwards, where we share with one another some of the struggles of life, things that we're going through when you're having a rough patch, or when you're having a bad day, or when something more serious is going on in life. And it kind of runs the gamut of all kinds of stuff. And it's really cool to be a part of that, to see people sharing kind of deep wounds and hurts, and being able to pray for one another.
Mhm.
And to know that people are praying for you if you're sharing stuff in there. I just think it's really cool. So thank you. My shout out is kind of to everyone who uses that and is and posts in there. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for allowing me to pray for you. But also just as a way of saying that, hey, if you're going through something, join the Discord and drop something in there, because we'd love to be lifting you up in prayer.
Yeah, I wasn't laughing at you. It's Spike
Mhm.
actually just posted something in Discord not too long ago that it's very Spike-esque. Um,
Ah, yes.
but
Hmm.
yeah. I want to shout out, and I meant to do this last episode, but I
Hmm.
forgot because I have the attention span of a goldfish, and
Mm.
I'm a 43-year-old dad of a 2-year-old, so I am very tired all
Hmm.
the time. Like
Yep.
it's that's my superpower. Like, the Incredible Hulk, he's like, yeah, that's my secret. I'm angry all the time. It's like this is my secret. I'm tired all the time. Um, but uh, I want to shout out like I am going to shout out an individual. Akasha in the Discord server a while back had recommended a book. I think it's called The Horrors of Scripture. Um, and again, it's sort of, and I might have shouted out like in a bro hang or whatever, but it's a bit of an academic text. It's kind of a
Hmm.
devotional sort of thing. It's a little pricey, but it is very good. I have found it to be really a really yeah, and I'm not super far into it, but it's been a really eye-opening read,
Okay.
challenging. It's like I don't want to use like all the different, but it's kind of one of those like it's punching me in all the right places and
Mm.
kind of like yeah, but yeah. So far, I have enjoyed it. So well done, sir. Thank you for that reco.
Hmm.
I
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Awesome.
But I think before we really kind of land this plane, though, we do need to like we had talked about last episode, our Christmas episode. We recorded some questions. Um,
Hmm.
but I think now like what we like to kick off every month for with or not for but what we like to kick off every month with is a little bit of a challenge or
Hmm.
you know so Josh, let's
Yes.
what challenges are you sort of going to what challenges are you laying out for yourself in the coming weeks, days, months, years, does the
Hmm.
yeah, various assortments of time, increments of
Yep.
time.
So in update from last month's challenge was to start memorizing scripture and having that become uh, uh, getting into a rhythm of regular scripture memorization. Um, I have failed at that. I have not installed that habit. And so I'd like to continue, as much as this is kind of a, oh, it feels like, yeah, just continuing that as my challenge. Yeah, I recognize that's kind of lame, but also because I failed, I recognize I do need to get better in this area. And so really what it comes down to is, like I said, installing a habit. And so putting some reminders down. So I don't know, maybe on the next episode I'll give an update as to whether or not I've done that, so that
Mhm.
I have these reminders in place and I have these lists of scriptures to memorize and things like that. And I actually do have a list of scriptures in mind that I would like to memorize. I just didn't move farther than that to the actual memorization. And so it's it's so important that I do want to challenge that. I want to keep that as my challenge over the next month. And then double shame if I fail again, which I won't. But if I do, then shame on my
Well, even if
ancestors
you
as well.
memorize like one verse from your list,
Yeah.
that's like a
Uh-huh.
little bit of, so it's
It's
like
better at least.
just memorize one, Josh.
Mhm.
Um,
Do
but
it.
yeah, scripture memorization is that's a good one to sort of like to hit. Um, I'm kind of gonna do like I'm adding a little bit of a wrinkle to this year's challenges, and so there's gonna
Okay.
be the big challenge, right? And then I'm gonna have like and there's gonna be little challenge, and little challenge is gonna be like a little more flexible. That's gonna be like the monthly stuff, and that might double up. But big challenge is going to remain until it has been accomplished, or I just sit under big shame. Um,
Mhm.
and so last year you ended the beatdown season with like a negative 10 or 11. It
Mhm.
was a substantial gap. And I thought about it, and this is something that year upon year, year after year after year, pretty much ever since we've sort of had the beatdown, or its prior incarnation as backlog golf. Um, I have just, I think that first year of backlog golf, I did really well. Um, and then as the beatdown sort of became a thing, I have struggled to make serious headway because like I am a man of little self-control at times. Um, and sometimes the deals or the shiny gets me. And so
Mm.
what I would like to do is at some point in time in this season, I would like to hit negative 10.
Mm.
It's like, I wouldn't even say like I need to end the season at negative 10. I just
Okay.
need to hit negative 10.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, like if I go further, or I end the season sort of like in that ballpark, that's a win. But I want to hit negative 10. Um, so that's my big challenge, is like, and it's
Yeah.
like, this is sort of like more fun, kind of like whatever. Um, but yeah, so hit negative 10. My little challenge, and it's sort of, again, going back to last month's, was just sort of praying through the Psalms. And
Mhm.
it's not a total failure. I have done it a few times, but it's been pretty scattershot. And I want to install it as a habit. I think that was a really good sort of, choice of words that you use there when talking about memorizing scripture, is that it's not as sticky as I want. It's not as reflexive as I want. And it's
Mhm.
not as consistent as I want. So I want to do a better job of that. I do feel like that's a discipline that would be good for me. And so I'm gonna sort of say like, yeah, I'm gonna stick with this again for this month, and hopefully, like when next month rolls around, I'll have been able to say like, oh no, like yeah, I actually kind of like came in here and I've been super consistent here, or at least
Mm.
mostly consistent. Um, so that's my little challenge, is like, hey, like continue to pray the Psalms, or pray through the Psalms, you know. So
Nice. That's awesome. So just like we've been doing for quite a while now with these challenges, we've always had, one challenge, but then today you've brought in another
Here
one.
comes a new challenger.
Yes. I like
the
it. I like it.
the
I forgot
big
to play that
challenge,
earlier.
the
So,
big yeah. I was
yeah.
waiting, and I was like, what's he doing?
I
He's
totally forgot
let me
about it.
hanging, and then I was just like, well, we'll just roll past it, and I will shame him later. But
Yeah.
now that now
Yeah.
that you have corrected your mistake, your error,
Mhm. Oversight.
your oversight, that's the word I was actually looking for.
Mm.
Yes, yeah.
Nice.
So good
Nice.
job.
That's a kinder word. I like it.
Yes. It
My
is a kinder
failure.
word. That's probably why I couldn't think of it, because I'm not always a kind person. Um, I'm
Oh,
a bit of a salty fart, um, a
you.
crusty,
Oh
salty
no.
meanie. I don't,
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah.
Well, it's getting late, and I am starting to fade a little bit. So
Awesome.
this is probably a pretty good place to land the
Yeah.
plane. So Josh, you know, if people want to get a hold of us, obviously they
Yeah.
can comment on this video, they can find us on the socials, but a way to find like all the different places that we're at. We have a link tree. What,
That's right.
yeah.
Yep. Linktree.com/the backlog breakdown that has links to a number of different things, all our social media and stuff like that. Or if you are watching us on YouTube, social media stuff should be in the description of this video as well. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Like I said earlier, suggestions that you have for us, but also kind of your thoughts. Or here's another thing actually, and you can leave a comment on this. Of do you see anyone else around the internet, around the space of video games, or it overlaps into pop culture, nerd culture, things like that. But anyone who who comes from a Christian worldview that has a robust way of talking about these things. Like we said, we've looked around and we haven't found very much, but we'd love to connect with other people who may already be doing this. Whether that's, again, showing them our stuff that we've been doing, but also just meeting new people and becoming a part of another community and just kind of making connections. We'd love to do that. So if you want to share that with us too, we'd love to hear that in any way you want to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. That being said, Josh, we have done the thing. Until next time, what should they do?
Guys, keep beating down your backlogs and we'll keep breaking down the benefits. We did it. We kept the entire recording under 2 hours. I say entire recording. I mean the entire episode under 2 hours.
Dude, your screen has been frozen since the 15-minute mark for me.
Really? Oh, dude, that's lame. Whoa. That's weird because I can see it on my end.
Yeah,
Man.
it's kind of like you're looking, like I'm looking at this picture of you and you're kind of looking down, and it's like I'm gonna try and okay, so your microphone's over here like
Yeah.
this, kind of, and you're kind of like
What?
you're just like
looking at my
looking
phone or
down,
something?
kind of like you're looking
Disinterested.
down at
Dang.
something. So it was just
Dude.
like, I was just like, well,
Yeah.
I know I'm
That's
talking to him, and it's
right.
like I didn't want to say like, hey, dude, yeah,
Video. Something's going on. That's weird. I wonder why that's the case. Oh well.
nah,
Zencaster,
Zen